I'm Matt Landau from VRMB, and this is Unlocked, Season 9, Homerunners. This episode features Steve Schwab, who's the founder and co-owner of Casago, a vacation rental management company and franchise model that's been growing throughout North America for more than 20 years. I had the chance to get to know Casago, as well as Steve and his business partner Ryan, who are the subjects of our second episode of Homerunners. That's the first docu-series to go behind the scenes, the world's leading vacation rental managers. And in the process, Steve's become my thought partner in a lot of ways. We've spent countless hours talking about deep questions about our industry, what we stand for, whether limited edition can scale, and where things can go drastically wrong for core stakeholders if we don't step up and do something. We don't often settle on any answers to these questions, but it is the skilled dialogue, this ping-ponging back of possibilities, that I appreciate about Steve the most. In this episode, we talk about how Steve went from living in a bar and helping a stranger fix his roof down in Mexico to running one of the most unique vacation rental growth stories in our industry today. This episode is brought to you by Point Central, the leaders in smart home automation, and Breezeway, a property care and operations platform. And like every episode this season, we kick off by asking Steve, what does the phrase Homerunners mean to you?
I think that it's become the context of people in the vacation rental industry that are hitting home runs.
Their own versions.
Right. In each of their own unique ways.
I like that. So you could be a single property owner and hitting a home run that's just changing your life.
Yep, in a very specific way. Maybe not even your own life, maybe somebody else's life. But there's something you're doing that's special, that's knocking it out of the ballpark in the part of the industry that you're contributing to or participating in.
And we are here in Oaxaca, Mexico. It's not often we get to do one of these in person. We're at something that you've been working on for some time, the 7th annual SABER conference, otherwise pronounced Saber. And this is the Casago Company retreat. What strikes you about this particular retreat compared to previous?
I think that with the evolution of the company, it started off as a retreat where everybody could fit in a small room. And it was a relaxing environment for the leaders of the company to engage, exchange ideas, build camaraderie. And while that holds true now, it's a much larger organization. So the coordination of it is a lot more, but the kinds of resources that are coming to bear now are providing a lot more value, just like having you here and having people with the diversity of thought and ideas outside our own echo chamber speaking into the people at Casago has tremendous value.
And what do you think it is about physical events, in-person events, that can't be achieved virtually?
You'll never be able to sit down and eat with somebody at a virtual event. And the amount of conversation and germination of relationships that build while you're not stuck for 1 hour on a camera trying to get in as much as you can changes the dynamic to where flow starts to happen without the constraints of being stuck on a camera and trying to get it all in. You don't have to plan as well. Like, things naturally start to bubble up and ideas start to be they start to be created on their own, and the collaboration where you can come back and forth and bounce the idea ball back and forth across the net until there's something pretty amazing to be had happens.
And I think you have those little spaces in between where weird things happen, insider jokes form, shared moments.
Right.
That doesn't happen on email or text or Zoom either.
Yeah. I don't know if you can ever really build a deep relationship as easily via a Zoom call as compared to walking through the streets of Oaxaca in a parade with some people you're starting to really like and know, and having those shared experiences that for years, you'll go back and talk about Matt balancing a pottery plant on his head quite well, might I add.
Thank you.
Just watching those things together start to build that tribe.
So if these relationships, these moments that we share together as high moments are so key, you've got people at this event that have been working with you now for 20 plus years. That's almost unheard of in our industry. And I don't think everyone knows your origin story. So start us from the very beginning. You were in Mexico after a breakup. And what happens next?
Well, I'm running out of money, and I'm living in the back of a bar for $5 a day, and that was starting to come to an end too. And a gentleman who was sitting at the bar was talking about how he needed some help and he couldn't climb up on a roof. And it was air conditioning stuff, and I had done some air conditioning things in high school. And I was like, well, I can come help you. And so next thing you know, I'm following this man, this very large man, 6'7", giant of a man, out to a place I've never been, kind of wondering what I'm getting myself into. And crawl up on the roof and grab some metal screws and start fixing the air conditioning duct on one of his vacation homes that he was managing. And so he thanked me and offered me some money.
Did you even know what vacation homes were?
No, remember that movie from the 90s that was called Beach House?
No.
It was with John Candy. I think it was Beach House. Anyways, knew very little about it. Nothing at all, probably.
Okay.
Not enough to know anything.
That it was a business, right?
Yeah, that was a business. I mean, I knew people would go to the beaches and rent homes sometimes, but it was not anything that I'd ever done or could have afforded to do. So went and helped him out a little bit, and he offered to pay me, and I said, no, just, don't worry, man. I could tell something wasn't right. He wasn't well. And next day he was back at the bar looking for me, and I did a little bit more work for him. And we ended up kicking off a friendship, went and had dinner at his house with his wife, Cindy. And then didn't hear from him for a while, and I'd heard he passed away. He had cancer, and that was what was wrong. And that's why he wasn't crawling on roofs, because he was sick from the chemo and things. And so Cindy ends up finding me, and she says, Steve, Bruce thought you'd be pretty good at this. I said, oh, Cindy, I don't want to be a maintenance man. She's like, no, dummy. She thought you'd be pretty good at this, vacation rental company thing. And then I said, okay, well, tell me more. She's like, well, come on over. I went over, and everything was manual. This is, 2000. And she shows me piles of papers. And she goes, this is the business, look through it. And I went through the whole thing, and it made like $35,000 the last year. It's like, holy moly, I'll be rich. That's freaking amazing. So, ended up taking over Cindy's Beach Home Rentals. And she came in. She was getting ready to leave. She didn't want to live in Mexico anymore. Wanted to go back to her family in Alaska. And she sat down and took a piece of paper out and wrote down every owner, their contact information, what everybody made. Everybody made a different commission. Everybody was paid on a different day. And she showed me this thing called an intake form, where when somebody called you on the phone, you'd write it all down. You'd tell them to send a money order to Mexico. And then she showed me an accordion file with about $60,000 of money orders, and said, these are your deposits, and they'll show up with cash. They'll drive cash across the border and hand it to you.
Like, what kind of business is this?
Yeah, I'm like, what I'm doing? And I'm like, where do I put the cash? She's like, I don't know. That's your problem now. And she said, but don't worry, I'll be back after lunch, and I'll give you more training. And that was the last time I saw her. So
she disappeared.
She didn't disappear. She just left. That 1 hour training was my introductory masterclass to vacation rentals.
And did you have experience with business before that?
I'd had a DJ business in college, and which was, fine. Basically, I drank beer and played music, and somebody gave me some cash.
What was your name?
Double A DJs, because if somebody was looking in the yellow pages for a DJ service, I'd be first. So it was back when alphabetical order mattered.
Did you have a DJ name?
No.
Okay.
No. I wasn't that good. I basically played music at bars and parties.
Bar mitzvahs.
Yeah, bar mitzvahs, a couple of those.
Mexican bar mitzvahs. So Cindy disappears. You're now running this thing on your own.
Well, yeah, and just hours later, the electricity shut off. My chair falls through. The furniture's breaking. There's no
Literally, the
electricity.
chair fell apart.
I literally was sitting in a chair, and the chair just freaking gives out. And I stand up, and the lights go out. The electricity hadn't been paid. The place is coming apart. Yeah, I had no idea what I was getting myself into.
And did you think about quitting?
No, never. No, people knew I was taking this over. There was no way I was about to fail. I wasn't as success driven as I was fear of failure driven. I didn't want to fail.
And who were some of the earliest employees, these people who have now been here for 20 years? And how'd you find them?
So from Cindy's, the name of the company was Cindy's Beach Terminals. We changed it to Seaside. We had Isaias, who worked for me all the way up until about 4 years ago. He passed away. I still have most of the original housekeepers that were there. There was 4 housekeepers. Still have 3 of them. The one housekeeper that did pass away was asked to be buried in uniform. Pallbearers were the maintenance guys, and she was buried in a Casago uniform.
Wow.
Yeah. As I started to hire people, they've all been with me. Janet, who's my personal assistant, she was 19 years old. She's been with me ever since. Erica, who started off as a front desk clerk, now runs all of Mexico. Marco started off front desk, learned English better. He could speak broken English, but became, conversational in English, became a resort manager, and now he owns Cabo as Casago. He's a peer. Hilda, all these people have been with me for decades now.
And when you took over that business, was your immediate instinct to start growing it and scaling it? Or did that just kind of come with the aversion to failure?
I had no ambition to grow a company. I'm not sure if I knew enough to grow a company. And if you'd asked me what scale was, I'd have told you something to weigh something with. It wasn't even in my head. We'd had an incident where called Rocky Point Management, and for whatever reason, they were really threatened by us and just really badmouthed the company everywhere, openly, ugliness towards us. And I told the staff, just stay classy, do our things. But we were taking their inventory. We were growing, and their inventory was being diminished by our takeover. And in the middle of the night, really in the early morning hours, the same day Saddam Hussein was captured, I was listening to it on XM radio, and I saw one of their vans driving towards the border about 100 miles an hour, just barreling recklessly. And it was filled with all sorts of equipment. And I thought, well, that's weird. And I get to Rocky Point, and they had left in the middle of the night. They'd taken all the homeowners' money. They hadn't paid their staff members. They loaded up all their equipment and drove it back to the border. The trust monies were gone. The Christmas bonuses were gone. The payroll was gone, and they were nowhere to be found. And they called me up, the HOAs, and said, hey, these guys have vanished. Can you help? And so I went into the offices, and I set up some makeshift front desks and started working for free to honor reservations, and they hadn't paid the owner's bills. So I went actually into a pawn shop and hawked some of my things and paid homeowners' bills that were with them and never signed up with us. And there was a homeowner there that was documenting everything, and I was actually a little skittish of him because I thought he was I wasn't sure why he was filming all this. And he started telling our story to all the locals. This is before Facebook.
He was a journalist or something?
kind of a self-made journalist, maybe fancied himself as a journalist.
Like a video blogger.
Yeah, and he just started telling the story, and he started telling everybody how I'd taken my own money to pay these homeowners' bills, and we went and got food and baskets and started taking donations so that all their employees could have something to eat over Christmas. And we started putting our own money in and started trying to make sure that everybody that had been harmed by them was okay. And after that, the community really embraced me. And that good faith and goodwill was a catalyst where, as they were building resorts, this was just the time they were about building resorts. And as new resorts came on, we were the favorite choice to take them over. And that's how we became prolific in Puerto Peñasco in Rocky Point, Mexico.
For a second there, I thought the 100-mile-an-hour barreling van was somehow connected to Saddam.
Right. We got to get back to save them. No, they're the Saddam of vacation rentals, I guess.
Was that a sort of proof of doing things when no one's watching, doing things out of the goodness of your heart as karma that comes back to you?
Yeah, there's I had a platoon sergeant in the Army that said, what you do when nobody's watching is who you really are. And the fact is, you should always be doing things as if somebody's watching, because the hope is somebody will accidentally catch you in the act of excellence. And eventually who you are always comes out. You can hide for a while. You can pretend to be the good guy, even if you're not. But eventually who you really are will always come out. And so if you get yourself morally straight and make sure that you're living your values, operationalizing those into your own personal principles, and doing them because that's what you expect of yourself, that's how you see yourself, people will accidentally catch you in that act of excellence.
I want to talk about values and principles in a second, but that little anecdote kind of reminded me of this thing that I experienced recently. I swim at the beach every morning, and there's this one guy who swims with us, Jeff. Whenever we're walking to the ocean or to the cars, he always picks up trash that he sees and throws it away. And I never do that. And I started watching, I was like, oh, why can't I do that? I mean, that's the right thing to do. He never said a thing, but I saw him doing it regularly, and now I do it. And I have to think other people watch me doing it and will do it too. But there's something about the social norms, what we were talking about, civic virtues, doing things for the community, for the neighborhood that they're not rules, but they're kind of like leading by example in a way.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, isn't that really what leadership is? I mean, if you are out preaching to do one thing and not living, the types of rules that are good for the community, the hypocrisy will show up, and you'll never really be a leader. You may be a manager. You may have appointed power, but you'll never have intrinsically earned, leadership of where people will follow you because they know you'll do the right things when things are hard or when nobody's looking.
So you come from a regimented world of the military and being an Army Ranger, and you take over this company, and I'm guessing you're pulling from that world, the systems, the standard operating procedures, the standards, how we do things. Can you talk about the formation of the company values and how they're used today regularly?
Yeah. I pulled from two things. I pulled from my experience as an Army Ranger and actually from my fraternity in college. There were some similarities there that allows them to operate remotely. These chapters, whether it's a Ranger out, in a combat situation completely on their own, isolated, that has to make decisions, or a chapter of young men who are trying to figure out how they make their own decisions, having some of these values and principles were that were the foundation of these was what was in common, was the connectors. essentially, the company was growing, and I was used to running small teams and being able to speak into everybody. I always talk about speaking into the people in our lives. And so I was going from person to person, like, here's how we do things. Here's why we're doing it. We got to make sure these homeowners are well taken care of. We got to make sure that we're treating these guests right. We're going to do it right because that's the right thing to do. That's who we are. And that was great when I could speak to everybody and I had time to have conversations with each of these people enough that they understood what the values, what the principles were and what the goals were. So I walked into the office one day and started realizing that there was people who I didn't know. Hey, who's that guy? Oh, we had to hire him. We have, we're expanding the hours. You told us to expand the hours. Yeah, I did. Okay, well, let me come meet him. And then pretty soon, like, hey, who's that guy? Well, he's been here for a week. I was like, where was I? You're at the other office trying to manage it. I'm like, oh my gosh. I started to see people who I wasn't speaking into them every day. I wasn't able to speak into their hearts, And so one day I walked into the office and I had a homeowner who had told me how rude we'd been. She had spoken about how we'd made some pretty dumb mistakes and then didn't own them. And then when she brought them to us, not only did we deny them, we were rude about them.
How'd you feel?
My heart sunk. And then I actually went into denial. I was like, there's something wrong. Maybe she misunderstood. Maybe there was a language barrier between my team and her. And I was like, we don't do that. That's not who we are. That's not who Casago is. And I went over and started talking to people. And sure enough, that's exactly what we did. And I was humiliated and like really sad and disappointed. And I was like, is this thing going to grow beyond me? And I was like, am I a good leader? Why did we fail like that? And I started doing some soul searching. And for a little bit, the company was getting away from me. The things I believed in, who I wanted us to be, my vision of how I wanted to have an organization under my leadership would act was at the fringes, struggling with it. And I was doing a lot of soul searching about it. And I went back to like my roots of being an Army Ranger, looking through, my time at the fraternity and thinking about organizations that I'd been in and trying to figure out what's happening here that's different, because there was something different happening. And I realized that the founders had written, the Ranger Creed. They had the Alpha Tau Omega, creed. And I started digging into it. I started reading them, and they were actually just really basic rules. There was nothing magical about them. You recognize, in the Ranger Creed, recognizing that you volunteered as a Ranger, knowing the hazards of your chosen profession. It starts talking about what I will do, and I started formating an idea that if I can't speak into everybody, I have to find a way to communicate to them and bring a system or a tools that the company will stand for what I believe as the founder that we should be. Otherwise, it's really not my company.
So until a company settles on its values, it's without that kernel center core.
It will always have values and culture. The question is, are you the one that's driving those forward and communicating them and being purposeful about them? Or are you allowing people who you've hired, who you may not know very well, to dictate them and build those social norms, which is your culture, and to start putting their ideas of what values are into your organization? If you don't have a clear understanding of what your values are and what your principles are, and if you're not being very clear in how you articulate them, and you're not constantly communicating them, you'll be in a wrestling match with other people within the organization of who's actually in control of your culture.
So it's your responsibility.
It is. It's yours and only yours. You're the soul of the organization.
So you and I have spent a couple months together talking about this stuff a lot. And the topic of values and principles was very new to me. I certainly never had core values, beliefs at my vacation rental company. I basically still don't with my current educational company, VRMB, but I'm in the process of forging them. Talk to us about the difference between values, the beliefs that you live by, look up to, and principles. Because those are two words that oftentimes get interchanged, but I've come to understand there's a clear difference.
In our time together, I think I've gotten clear about them, because when I had to start speaking about them, and as you've asked me questions about them, I had to get real clear about it. And it's been a good journey for me as well. So, a value is something that we hold dear. It's a belief that we hold dear and that we'll make decisions on. It's an anchor point for our morals and ethics. It's something we use as framework within our heads of how to make decisions about. And so once we become clear on those, because a lot of us aren't clear on them, I think we can feel them. I think we know what they are, but we're maybe fuzzy about being able to articulate them.
And for those who are listening and maybe haven't gone through this exercise before, I'll share the quick inspirations. One way of finding your value is to think of a high moment in your professional life, or if you're talking personal values in your personal life, and what values were channeled. Another way is think of someone you really admire in the workspace, or maybe even outside, what values they are channeling. And finally, if there was a moment in which you were embarrassed or sad or angry, what value was transgressed.
Right, exactly.
And then you arrive at this little set of values, at least you're starting to put your finger on them.
It's a great way to start understanding or start looking for where they start to shine out, to flush those out. I think it's also pretty important to understand what your personal values are as opposed to your business values. On your personal values, you have, your professional values and your obituary values, right?
Shout out to Amanda.
Shout out to Amanda, exactly. So I think that you have to start with your personal values, because if your personal values are in conflict with your professional values, there's going to be hypocrisy there. And I always say that your children and your employees are the first two to know if you're being a hypocrite. And you've got to make sure they're in alignment. If you are building a company and if your values are, I want a lot of money, I want to build this thing and flip it, I may be burning bridges going forward, I may be, stepping on toes, but, people might not like what I do, but this is who I'm going to do, and this is what I am, and this is what I'm going to do.
Which are all fine.
Those are fine, but say it out loud and speak it. Don't go into a situation where you're suddenly like, oh, we're here doing it for the love of people. We're doing it because we care about the community. No, you don't. Don't lie about it. Be honest, because honestly, you'll attract the kind of people that you want to help you drive that train forward.
Right.
If you're honest with yourself and your business and your team about exactly what you want, you'll find the right people to drive that train forward in the right direction.
As opposed to lying about it, attracting people who are going for the lie, and then they're like, what? I thought I signed up for the good fuzzy feeling, and you're trying to drive this ship into the moon.
Exactly, yeah. And you'll have an amazing amount of churn if you do that, because people will be like, I signed up for one thing and I'm getting something else, right? So be honest with yourself and be clear with yourself what your values are. And then make sure that your business values line up with your personal values, right?
Cool. So we've got the layer of personal values. We've got the layer of business values. Once the values are established, where do principles come into play?
Well, that's how you operationalize your values, right? So you might have a value of trust, like I value trust or honesty. Well, how do we operationalize that, right? So maybe you might say, a principle that we're going to have here is that we will always put photos into all of our work orders, or we'll say we will always tell the homeowner all the news, good or bad, right? Now what's happened? Well, we've created transparency because transparency is part of how you build trust. So now that we know that trust is our value, we start adding rules for people to make decisions on so that they can build trust. So they're really just operationalized values that allow your team to understand what to expect and how to make decisions as they go forward. So when you lead them well on the principles, over time, you start to build social norms because this is what I expect from you. I expect you to follow these principles. I'm going to articulate them to you. I'm going to do it consistently. I'm going to do it constantly, but I'm also going to live those principles myself. And over time, they will start to trust you. They'll start to live those principles. When they start to live those principles, it builds trust in them, and then that builds empowerment. And the culture of all that comes through as you're living these principles. You start to have social norms of what you expect from each other, and being very present about those, being very intentional about those is what creates a culture that you have control over and fits your vision. And that's how you take people who start off as a front desk clerk and end up having them own an entire city under your brand name and knowing that they're going to do the right things.
And one of my favorite quotes of yours that you just kind of flung out of the blue in Tennessee was that clearly articulated principles, repeated consistently, can turn a herd of cats into a team of horses. Is that what all these people who are starting to get burned out and or who are struggling to step away from their business a little bit, who are sort of slaves to the business, is that the piece that they're missing?
It's because they haven't built a culture and led people to empowerment, and they're afraid to trust them. So they're constantly in the middle of everything, and it's burning them out. It's exhausting to have to do it all yourself and to constantly worry if somebody's going to make a wrong decision. It will wear you down. It'll burn you out. And so if you're going to ever run any sort of organization, small or big, if you're not leading people through your expectations, building social norms that become your culture, that turns into trust, that turns into empowerment, you're basically the leader with 1,000 minions. And if everybody has to come to you for every single thing, you're not a leader, you're a dictator. So the question I would ask somebody who's there, what kind of leader do you want to be? Do you want to be a leader that empowers people? Or do you want to be a dictator that tells everybody exactly what they have to do and when?
Can that work with like one employee?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's one employee at a time. Mm-hmm. It starts with only one person, and you work on each individual. It's an individual task.
And now a word from our sponsors. Point Central provides smart property solutions for smart vacation property managers. They help streamline operations, protect the property, and enhance the guest experience using keyless access. Why? Because guests are tired after traveling, duh. And being able to go directly to that property with keyless access instead of stopping at a manager's office, this is no longer a luxury. This is a standard practice. Plus, everybody loves avoiding extra trips due to lost keys, not to mention the constant cost of rekeying. Point Central partners stay aware with an activity log of who enters and leaves the property, which helps keep track of cleaning and maintenance crews as well. You can also gain control of your utility bills with their smart thermostats. Schedule set points so guests won't be able to drastically raise or lower the temperatures, for instance. You can ensure the temperature stays consistent when the unit is vacant. Prevent costly maintenance projects caused by water leaks, mold, or HVAC issues with real-time alerts that allow you to be proactive. Visit pointcentral.com/VRMB to learn more. And Breezeway, whose property care and operations platform helps you coordinate, communicate, and verify the detailed work and deliver the best service experience to your guests. With tools for intelligent task scheduling, quality assurance, real-time work coordination, guest messaging, supplies management, owner reporting, and more, oh my! Breezeway helps thousands of short-term rental managers and hospitality operators increase your operational efficiency and eliminate hours of manual work. This allows you to boost your service revenue. It was created by the founding team of FlipKey, which was since acquired by TripAdvisor, and Breezeway is just elevating the experience at every property they touch. Visit breezeway.io/VRMB and get implementation fees waived. That's a $1,000 value right there. Okay, let's get back to the show. So let's bring all of this now to present day. We have Casago, which is headquartered, its origins in Rocky Point, Mexico, this wonderful little town where you got your start. You built out these franchises with these local heroes. So how many franchises are in Mexico?
There's 11 right now in Mexico.
And each of these people learned about the values, learned about the principles at a university that you built, as far as I'm aware of, one of a kind institution in our industry, an actual building compound with classes. How long is the program?
It depends on what course you go through, but a minimum of 2 weeks to include on-site and off-site, and this continual training, annual reviews, recertifications, power user, courses. It goes from zero all the way up to ownership.
So every employee has passed through that process, that program. And we were interviewing Carlos Corzo, and he said, in the early days, Steve said everyone has to pass through the university, and if they don't have a passing grade, they're not going to get hired. And I said, that's impossible. And he said, no, it's going to be one of the really important pillars of how we keep employees. And that still stands, correct?
Yeah, we lose about a third of the people in Casago University.
Because it's a lot. It's a long thing.
It's intense. You have to want to be there. You don't just show up. You show up every day. There's homework at night. You got to come back. You got to pass your grades. There's an 82 questions essay test at the end that you have to pass. It's intense. It's the real deal.
It reminds me of one of my favorite marketing consultants. He has what he calls the hardest copywriting course in the world. And it is really hard. But the people who are drawn to it, the people who stick with it, and the people who graduate it become these world-class copywriters. The people who graduate Casago University, they end up becoming these lifelong Casago ambassadors. Mm-hmm. And you eventually reached this sort of inflection point, I think of it as. All of the wonderful energy and momentum that was being built in Mexico. You found yourself at VRMA executive conference, and talk us through what happened as your turning point.
Yeah, so I'm sitting there with two gentlemen at a table, and don't know them very well. Actually, don't know them at all. And I'm sitting listening to Eric Brion just tear into local property managers, being really braggadocious about how local property managers will never compete with him. They've got tools that nobody else will ever have, enterprise tools that they couldn't afford, support systems that they could never be part of, and that they should just go ahead and, in not so many words, give up and sell to him.
And this is the founder of Vacasa.
That's the founder of Vacasa. And it was already starting to make me angry. And then he turned to Mike Harrington on stage and pretty much told him, let me know when you need a job. And I really respect Mike Harrington. I think he's a really great guy, and I think he's been a good property manager and good for the industry. And man, my blood boiled. I felt my face turn red. And I sat there and I was like fidgety. And we went to break. And it was lunchtime. They had a beer station. So I went over and I was sitting with these two guys in front of the beer station. I told them, you know what? I do this thing in Mexico and I have an idea for the U.S. What if we as Casago could provide you all the enterprise tools? We're already at a size that we could. And we could provide you all the back-end support. And we could help you with your software. And we could make it net neutral. If we could make it so that the amount of money we're saving you and the shared costs of what we're offering ends up not costing you any more than what you're already doing, but suddenly the Casa should have to be afraid of you because you're the local hero. You're the local. And now you've got tools that they have and support systems that they have and a training system that they don't have. And what if we can make you the best property managers in the world and you're the local guy? And they both looked at me with very puzzled looks and said, yeah, can you do that? I think so. And by the end of that month, one of them signed up as our first franchise in the U.S. And the next one was short to come. And now he's got 2 franchises running under Casago. And it's been fantastic.
And who are those 2 people?
That's Nick Lanza and Mike Reinman.
In what their destinations are, respectively?
Big Bear, and the other one's and Mike is in Kona and in the Redwoods.
So what kind of heavy lifting logistics were required to offer them a franchisee type relationship in the States?
Well, we had to go out and get a franchise disclosure document, which was a lot more than I thought it would be. And that took a lot longer to do than I thought it would. But we got that done and got through that. And then, the systems were built to be internal tools. So we started turning wrenches and pulling levers and pushing buttons and reformatting Casago University to become an outward-facing organization. And we've tripled the size of Casago University now in manpower. We're getting ready to build another 2 stories on top of it because it's starting to become the centerpiece of the offerings we have at Casago.
And at this point enters Ryan to the world of Casago, right?
So Ryan has been a competitor of mine for years. And we would call and talk and we'd be like, hey, are you having a problem with this vendor? Yeah. Man, they're doing this. Yeah, they are. Don't do that. Hey, I've got somebody else. And we were like literally in the same markets and passing ideas back and forth, sharing ideas. And he's an incredibly magnanimous guy and this huge personality of happiness and kindness and just this amazing human being. And we became friends through it. We'd go out for beers and start sharing notes back and forth of how to be better property managers. And through COVID, we decided to join forces, and he became my business partner, in Casago. We merged his company Patzu in. We shared equity in the company as a whole. And quite honestly, Ryan is the jet fuel to Casago's growth. If it wasn't for Ryan, Casago wouldn't grow the way it grows. I have made the analogy that I built a jet, and he showed up with the jet fuel. And, I put infrastructure together and mechanical pieces together and assembled parts and pieces and a pretty good operation. And in walks Ryan pouring jet fuel into the tanks, and it takes off. And that's really him. He's the success we're having wouldn't be there without him.
Do you think there's something about his background, specifically the mission work that he did in bringing a idea to new territories?
Well, you couldn't ask for better training to sell an idea, right, than being a Mormon missionary. And the amount of, door knocking, rejection, and still being, in the fight to make sure that you're getting out something you believe in out there. What a perfect training ground for Casago. He's the right guy with the right background at the right time. And I'm really proud to call him my business partner and a friend.
And so he is now kind of, at least from my vantage point, taking the package, everything that Casago represents and what it can offer to an existing vacation rental manager. He's then bringing it to these individuals who have been running their businesses for time and maybe are starting to get burned out and or struggling to deal with the increased demands of the professional craft, are struggling to compete with bigger companies with more resources, and offering them an option that's not sell to Vacasa, that's not close down the shop, but to continue doing what they love most, the hospitality, the local leadership, the community stuff, with this back engine plugged in. Talk to us about some of the franchisees that have become part of the family because of Ryan.
Yeah. I think one of Ryan's superpowers is he's genuinely interested in people, like genuinely. Like, it's not a facade. He's not fake. He's the real deal. He truly is interested in people. And so when he shows up at these offices, he actually is curious, like, what problems are you having? What's going on in your life? And often, some of these franchisees don't even know we do franchising for days, because he's not in there just trying to sell something. Like, he's actually deeply invested into a lot of these people. And, he builds relationships with people, and through those relationships starts to, plant the seeds of, I'd love to be part of something like Casago. And sure enough, these people start to show up and they want to be part of it, and they start to see the value. There's people like Kelly Hill, who really just was burned out, wanted to sell her business, didn't know what she wanted to do with it. And when we came in, she was skeptical. And
she says you talked her down off the ledge.
Yes. And we've been able to turn that around for her, where she's got a healthy relationship with her company again. There's people like Mike out of Sun Valley.
Mike Godfrey.
Yeah, Mike Godfrey. And he was passing his company down to his children, and he was wondering, how does that work, right? What kind of resources or what kind of plan is there to take this to the next generation? And he decided that having the franchise model, so that there was somebody there to help his kids, there was somebody that had their back, was the right thing for him. And he's been incredibly happy.
How many of these franchisees have joined on in the past year?
Most of them in the U.S. The past year has been our biggest.
How many in total?
I believe we're gonna hit 18 cities this year.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what's the relationship like with these Kelly Hills and Mike Godfreys of the world? What do they give you, Casago, and what do they get?
What they give us is to be part of a team. And actually, I'm going to take that back. What they give us is to be part of our community. It's not just a one-way street. We're not just handing over a whole bunch of assets, tools, and training and processes, for cash. That's not what this is about. We're building a community. And when you sit with these people and start talking to them, and we all start to identify with the same values and the same characteristics and the same principles and the same goals, a group of people with an identity becomes a community. And we're watching now this flywheel of good faith starting to happen, where it's just not Casago University or our subject matter experts of business development or revenue management that's providing value. They're providing value to each other now. And it's becoming fascinating to watch them becoming contributors to what this thing is going to be. They're becoming leaders in their own right. Stacy, for instance, she's really becoming an amazing leader within the community itself, and each of them have their own unique talents, and they're all starting to help each other where the other ones may need a little bit of a boost. We all have strengths and weaknesses, And it's fun to watch them start to put their arms around each other and start to lift each other up. It's pretty fascinating and incredible.
Financially, do they pay a percentage of the revenue?
Yeah. Yeah, we have a royalty fee every month, and it covers, everything from the software to revenue management, basic revenue management to
Call center.
SEO. It's all, there's an all included package, and then there's some a la carte services if people need, if they want extra like nighttime call centers. There's some packages we have for that, but those aren't required.
And then what are they giving up about their existing business? Do they still own it? How is the brand changed at all?
Yeah, they still own it. It's still their company. This is their company. They're the local heroes. I always say you can only be a local in one place. They're the ones that are providing being a local in one place, and it's their company. They get to make decisions on how that looks and how that runs. We do have requirements. You have to be operating ethically and within our values, and violation of our values could cause in a separation. We don't want somebody out there. If you're out there doing the wrong things, you don't have a place at Casago. If you want to go out there and do the right things, if you're a true vacation rental nerd, if you're really passionate about what we're doing here and you want to be better and you need a little help or you want to be part of something, we're the right place for you.
And that means new people, right? Like people who are just getting started. I just met some folks who are literally at the very beginning of their vacation rental journey, and they're franchisees.
Yeah, and they're crazy excited, right?
Yeah.
Have you seen them? Man, it's fascinating to watch them. It's pretty amazing to be part of what's going to happen with them.
That's a legitimate new wave, I think. People who are entering the industry now, who are clear on what they want, who have unprecedented guidance and resources and communities that they can join if they want to. Those guys are going to be so much more prepared than someone who's getting started in that region without those resources, much less probably some of these more established companies in those regions, because these guys have all the energy in the world. They're just starting.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, they're young and excited. They're ready to go. So it's fun to watch. The way we serve a new office is probably a little different than the way we serve an older office, or an office that's already been existing, is coming on. Helping existing operators, put process into place, understand what their values are, helping them with our softwares like Audiences, which helps business development, or Casago, which is a CRM that does nothing but help you manage your homeowner leads. Streamline, becoming a power user, Streamline. These are all things that we can help put in place and help them be better. It's fun to also see somebody coming on as a greenfield operator, somebody brand new coming out of the ground, and handing them these tools and telling them there's like no reason for you not to be successful. You've got enterprise tools that can compete with anybody. Let us help you. And they go off and they become successful. And it's really deeply satisfying to see them become successful and happy in what we're doing. Ryan, when he's out talking to new possible partners and franchises, if they ask for referrals, he says, look at our website, pick any city, I'll give you their contact information. And there's a lot of validation in that.
Love that.
Yeah.
I would be remiss if I didn't take a couple minutes just to get your thoughts on the future of vacation rentals. You're a very visionary person. You think many, many years beyond how I think. I mean, I'm still planning for this afternoon. But you tend to see things in the future in ways that only a small handful of people that I've ever met do. What is an important trend you think people need to be aware of with regards to technology?
Just looking backwards of how much the simplest technologies have changed the industry, automated door locks, for instance. I personally do miss people coming to the office and giving them a key and shaking hands and getting to know them. And every year seeing them come back. There's a family I watched, they were dating when I first met them in Rocky Point, and they got married the year before, and they brought me some photos of their wedding. And then the year later, she was going to have a baby. And then she skipped a year, and then they came down with their baby. And it was like these great stories of people that we got to know and kind of love on.
Because of the old school keys.
Yeah, because the old school keys of getting to meet people, and like you're like, wow, they're back again. And I think they actually came back because they had a relationship with us, right? I miss that a lot. That's probably been the biggest change. That's great for efficiency, but bad for relationship, at least from my point of view. I really miss those people and building those relationships. It's been one of the biggest struggles I've personally had with change. I think property management softwares as a whole have been a great tool of getting us here, but they're a logistics system. I think they'll start to become an operating system where they're doing much more than just logistics. I think we're going to end up in a place where they're going to start interacting with the property itself, whether it's through accelerometers that are going to the bathrooms to let us know when things are leaking, or when the air conditioning is running too long because your freon's low, or if the vibration is at a certain megahertz, we know that compressor is going out in the next 120 hours of use, just like the hospitals and airplanes have.
Smart homes,
smart sensors. I'm not sure about smart homes, but smart sensors.
What's the difference?
I think a smart home is kind of a term that we use for like the home itself, sort of built as a smart integrated technology, whereas opposed you can take a RFID tag that actually has an accelerometer on it. You can put up against a toilet, and when you shoot an RF radio frequency at it for a few minutes, and you can see how it's vibrating, you can actually tell whether or not that toilet's running, and there's no batteries needed, right?
That might be one of the best sentences I've ever heard on this podcast.
Really?
I didn't understand what much of it meant, but it's awesome.
So smart sensors that can retrofit non-smart homes so that the software itself can start operating and helping us manage the home itself. And so it becomes an operating system where the system not only knows who's checking in, who's checking out, how much should we charge, what the taxes are. Here's a cleaning schedule. Here's the checkout schedule. You also know, hey, the house is sick. The house isn't well. There's plumbing issues. There's air conditioning is about to go out. I know where my team is, and my team who's closest to this property who's having an issue is suddenly having communication about getting over there before somebody's checking in. I think that's where we go in the next 10 years.
What about the world of property management softwares? Do you think there will be continued consolidation there? Because there's a lot of them out there.
There's a lot. There has to be. I think that there's probably too many for them all to survive. If you're just out building another property management software, it's not like it was when Carlos started building Streamline, right? It's now a commodity. There was only 4 or 5 people that we were competing against at Streamline, right? There's like Barefoot, RNS, LiveRes.
And full disclosure, you were part of the Streamline creation, right?
Yeah, I was part of that story. I was one of the early investors and partner in that business. It was a small handful of property management software systems that were actually good. There was a few out there that were kind of, home built or whatever, but now it's a commodity. And so unless you have a deep, long vision, if you don't have a very deep and long vision of what the next iteration is going to look like, of an innovation that is truly unique and has a deep moat, you're just building another commoditized software that you're going to have to figure out how to sell for the same as everybody else right now.
Does the same thing apply to the third-party or auxiliary app type softwares?
Yeah, I mean, I have a really good friend who's in tech. They actually buy tech companies, and something he said recently really has stuck with me. That it used to be that software developers were hard to find, and it was almost like a white collar position to get a hold of something like that. And it's really sort of become a blue collar industry now, with outsourcing to other industries, or other parts of the world. Programming has become prolific, and the affordability of building these virtual machines as software to do certain things has become a lot more affordable. So the proliferation of all these different ideas being thrown at the market is exacerbated by how cheap the technology has become. So unless you have a really great idea, you're just another one of come-latelys doing the same thing. You've got to have something that's really stand out, and it has to have value. It can't be a novelty anymore. The days of doing novel things to get software sales has come to an end. You've got to provide a really interesting value that solves a problem that nobody else does to stand out now.
And removing your Casago hat for a moment, what do you think is the future of vacation rental management? What does that player look like of the future?
I mean, it goes one of two ways, right? Either this industry finds its leadership, allows for a diversity of ideas and voices to be heard, and starts to advocate for itself and starts self-imposing the proper rules and regulations, and we continue to grow in a healthy way, or we continue to squander our industry on a lack of leadership, allowing the same old guard to stand in front of us and tell us how they used to do it. And we tell everybody that we shouldn't have any rules, and we'll end up having rules put on us that will harm our industry, and it'll crush the freedom of the industry. If we don't discipline ourselves, somebody else will. And self-discipline is always the best discipline. So it's time that we either pick up the mantle and allow this industry to become a healthy, viable industry, and we grow up and get on with it, or we squander what this industry could become, in the next 20 years.
And so oftentimes I get consumed by this work that we do, because it's all that I do, and I lose perspective. But when I take the step back, I realize, like, in the big scheme of things, we're just at the very beginning. Mm-hmm. It's kind of just getting started, and it's an important moment.
We're at an inflection point, and there's a whole bunch of new blood coming in, and they need to be. We don't need to be protectionists. We need to engage them. We need to get a really big tent and bring them all in. And if you're somebody who truly cares about the industry, if you truly care about your community, you're not using your community, you're loving your community, and you're part of your community, you have a place. If you're a bad actor, you probably don't. But that big tent needs to be for everybody who's a good actor and who actually cares about the industry, cares about their community, cares about all the stakeholders involved, and finds a way to build, help build the next generation of this industry. Plant that tree that the next generation will sit under the shade of.
Is that part of what your legacy will be?
The only thing I hope that my legacy or my obituary says is that I was good to the people who I loved. Nothing else really matters. That when they lay me down, that the people that I loved and cared about, that they believe that, with mistakes included, that I added to their life, and that I brought them value. That's my only obituary goal, I think. If I do more than that, I'd love to do that. But I do love the industry, so I guess that kind of includes that, doesn't it?
What a clarifying note to end on. I want to congratulate Steve, and perhaps more importantly, the whole Casago team, for putting on such an uplifting company event down in Oaxaca, Mexico. I do not think I have ever eaten so many crickets before. I even balanced a big basket on my head. My big takeaway from observing Steve and the company that he's built is that everything in our industry, whether you are building a global brand or a small lifestyle brand that impacts people one by one, it all boils down to who you are and what specifically you want. If you can get clear about those values, and then you can operationalize those values in the form of principles, if you are living those values regularly, it becomes pretty easy to decide whether it's a company for you or if you're actually working in an environment of hypocrisy. If you and your team are aligned, your business is no longer dependent on you. You are no longer the fail point. And once you have this kind of freedom, this kind of control over your profession, you are pretty much unstoppable. In Casago, they call these people local heroes. So I'd ask you, listener, what kind of local hero are you? Finally, here's something not a lot of people know about me and Steve. Back in the day, Steve attempted to join our private community. And for whatever reason, I told him that he wasn't welcome because his company was too big. And that was a mistake of mine. I had in my mind, for whatever reason, that our private community was designed exclusively for small vacation rental owners and managers. But Steve was patient and very kind, and over the years, we started getting to know one another, and eventually he reapproached the question and asked if he could join our community. And indeed, of course, the answer was proudly yes. If you'd like to join someone like Steve and myself and over 1,000 of the world's most thoughtful vacation rental managers, join VRMB communities. You can learn more at vrmb.com/join. Until next time.